with postcards, we are postcarding 1.2 million Black voters in Florida, 68 counties, who are infrequent voters. These are people who didn't vote in the last two primaries. And we have until August 8th to write all those postcards. So far, we've assigned, writers have taken 440,000 addresses, which is a little bit less than, less than half. So we're getting there, but we still have a lot of addresses to go. After that, I should say we are going to be starting to postcard Virginia in late July, and we'll be continuing to postcard them because their early voting starts 45 days before the November 8th primary, November 8th election. And then we will also be postcarding our additional 7 states. Probably North Carolina and Georgia will come pretty soon after we start Virginia, probably in August, because we have large groups in both those states that want to postcards.
One little
also
bit
the
more.
Other states, Texas, Alabama.
One little bit more about the Florida postcarding is we don't mail them until August 1st. So there's a mail range of August 1st to August 8th, and that's really important.
And I see people in the chat saying they're working on postcards. Thank you all very, very much for all of your work, sending postcards, making phone calls, doing text messages, anything and everything. One of the things that we found, courtesy of the Atlanta NAACP, they did a poll or a survey of 1,000 voters in Georgia in 2020 who did not vote. And the top 3 reasons given were, number 1, I didn't know where to vote. Reason number 2, I couldn't get there. And the distant third reason was, I didn't like any of the candidates. So the work that we do is very, very, very important. We've noticed that many campaigns do not give people the level of information they need to be able to successfully vote. We've noticed even here in Virginia, which has 45 days of early voting, we are getting postcards that are telling people to vote on November 8th and not even making people aware that Virginia now has early voting. Gabe, do you want to give an update on phone banking?
Sure, just got off our Thursday phone bank, in fact, and we're making calls into Arizona right now to get out the vote because early voting has already begun and runs all the way until August 2nd. Our contact rates seem to be especially good for Pima County, but they're also good for Maricopa, so that's encouraging news. So if you feel like hopping on the phones and maybe marking a few less wrong numbers than you sometimes do, come on over to our phone bank page. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have a national guided phone bank. So I'll post a link in the chat where you can scroll down and sign up for a phone bank.
All right, thanks. And I'm just seeing all these notes fly through the chat of people that are writing and working on postcards. This is great. And our guest is here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. We are so delighted to have you join us this evening. I know that life as an activist is incredibly busy. Life as an activist candidate is probably almost too much to imagine. So what I'm going to, I actually have one more minute. So I'm going to thank everybody for joining us again. And it is my pleasure to introduce Justin Metzler, who is our National Phone Bank Team and Advocacy Liaison, who had the pleasure of meeting Maxwell Frost. So Justin, take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin. My pronouns are he, him, his. It is my honor and privilege, and I'm so excited to introduce you all to Maxwell Alejandro Frost. Maxwell Frost is a longtime Florida organizer and activist. As a former national organizer with the ACLU and the former national organizing director with March for Our Lives, he has led the fight to restore voting rights to over 1.6 million Floridians who previously had felony convictions, organized a youth voter turnout program that helped drive record turnout, and helped secure an unprecedented $5 billion in funding for community-based violence prevention programs in President Biden's budget proposal. Now, at 25 years old, he's running to be the first member of Generation Z elected to Congress. Maxwell, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Justin. And hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Like Justin said, my name is Maxwell Alejandro Frost, candidate for Congress here in Florida's 10th Congressional District. My pronouns are he, him, is, his, and it is an honor to be with y'all here tonight. I have been in this work for 10 years. And for me as an organizer, I truly believe that the greatest tool we have is our story. And so I just want to start with that. I got involved 10 years ago at 15 years old. I remember the night specifically. I'm a jazz band drummer. When I was in high school, I went to an arts high school. And before every concert, my best friends and I would go to this Fridays across the street from the school, and we would load up on a bunch of junk food. And I remember we're there loading up on the chicken tenders and the quesadillas and everything. And a silence fell across the entire restaurant. We all looked up at the television screens, and we saw that somebody walked into an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, and murdered 20 students, children, and 6 teachers, actually. And I'll tell you, for me, seeing that on the news had a big impact on me. I couldn't play right that night. I kept thinking about it. I was in school. I kept thinking about it. I was at home. I kept thinking about it. And, I was able to go to DC to go to the memorial that was going on. And it was the night at the memorial. It was all of the students and all the folks who lost family members from Sandy Hook sitting around this hotel pool. We were wading our feet in the water. And then there was little Maxwell Frost from Florida. And across from me, there was a guy named Matthew Soto. Matthew's sister, Vicky, was a teacher at Sandy Hook. And when she heard the gunshots, she hid her class in cabinets and she saved their lives. When the shooter came around and asked where they were, she refused to tell him, and he murdered her. At the time, Matthew was 16 years old. And seeing a 16-year-old crying, sobbing, talking about how much he missed his sister, seeing a 16-year-old with the demeanor of a 60-year-old crying over his sister who was murdered for going to school to do her job, it changed my life forever. I ran straight to my hotel room. I remember I called my mom because she's a public school educator. She's actually retiring next year. I thought about my sister, and I said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to fight for a world where no one has to feel the way I saw Matthew feel that night. And that's what got me involved in this work. And y'all know how it is. You get involved for one reason, and you find out that there's a lot of problems. But the good thing is that for every problem, there's so many solutions. And for every solution, there's even more people doing the work. And there's no greater example of that than this call here tonight. Having over 100 people coming together on this fine evening to say, we're going to be a part of the solution, not the problem. And so again, y'all, thank you so much for being here. Right after that, I started working in politics full-time right out of high school, have worked campaigns across Florida, worked for the ACLU, went to become the national organizing director at March for Our Lives. And something that I learned during my journey of being a part of some really big struggles is the fact that our action and our vote, it's one of the most powerful things that we have. I worked on amendment 4, the ballot referendum, to give people with previous felonies the right to vote here in Florida. Our state is under attack by fascist dictators like Governor Ron DeSantis, who are trying to take away the right to vote from everyday people, and specifically Black and brown communities. It's illegal in the state of Florida to give a water bottle to somebody waiting in line. Can you believe that? They've passed a bill to get money to create an election police force to scare people from going to vote. We live in some dark and, to be quite honest, terrifying times, but I still have hope, because I refuse to be hopeless, because I want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. And we live in a time where we've lost Roe versus Wade. Gun violence is killing 100 people a day. There are attacks on our LGBTQ plus community every day. Women are still not getting paid the same as men. These things are still happening. And so in these times, we have to realize that there is a thin line between these traumatic events taking someone and pushing them to never vote again, or pushing them to vote every single time and bring a friend with them. It is up to us, and it is up to our leaders to decide what direction they go in. And so I just want y'all to know that as you do your work, as you do postcards, as you do phone banking, if you're knocking doors, every time you touch someone and you speak with someone, you're sowing seeds of love in our community. And you're saying that you deserve better by virtue of being a human being. And that's all. That's all you need. I think Angela Davis said it right. I'm no longer accepting the things that I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. And I know y'all can't accept what's going on now. I can't accept it. That's why I'm running for Congress. And that's why I'm excited to be here with y'all tonight. So again, thank you so much. And excited to answer any questions folks might have.
Thank you, Maxwell, for your inspiring words and all the work that you're doing. So as you can see, with so many people on this call tonight, many of them are sending right now handwritten postcards into Florida. So for the primaries, we are contacting Black voters across the state to vote. So you touched on this a little, but could you speak more to what you say are the top issues most important to Black voters at this moment?
Definitely. What we find, and I'll speak specifically to my district, is people are number one, we hear people are very worried about gun violence. People are worried about the fact that one of the most intimate human rights, not just civil rights, human rights that folks have just been stripped away from over half of our population, the right to an abortion. People are concerned about their voting rights being stripped away, but also people are concerned about the cost of living right now. What we see is that costs are going up, and wages have been the same for a long time. And it's not necessarily one person's fault. This is years, decades of things that have been going on. And so folks are at this point, I think, are feeling a little demoralized. But what gives me hope is people getting that handwritten postcard from someone they've never met, saying you deserve better, and to get to that better, we need you to go vote. I think Reverend Raphael Warnock said it best. He said a vote's kind of like a prayer, and not to get too religious, but prayer is better when you do it together. And so pushing people to go out and vote, I think, is really important, and using the issues and these times that we're in to not just scare people. And I say this all the time as far as getting young people to vote. Let's not give people something to vote against. Let's give people something to vote for. Let's build that future and say, you belong in it. And so for me, it's talking about those issues. But I really believe at this point, it is gun violence. It is the fact that civil rights are being attacked, human rights are being under attack, and the fact that people just need more money in their pocket. At the end of the day, over 60% of the people in my district, they can't afford an unexpected $300 bill tomorrow. For me, everything we do has to be about righting that wrong and ensuring people have money to feed their kids and just live their dreams, do what they want to do in life. Learn how to play the drums, learn how to play the piano, go out and have a good time, and not be simply surviving, but thriving. And that's a future I believe in. And I think that's one that we all collectively need to continue to push and not give up on.
Thank you. Yes. So as more members of Generation Z, people born after 1996, become eligible to vote and even run for office, how can we best engage with and motivate this emerging demographic?
This is a great question, and and for folks who don't know, I think a lot of times, the discourse around youth vote is interesting because I'm told all the time, young people aren't voting, young people aren't voting, but the trend shows something different. It's changing, right? In 2018, after March for Our Lives, we had the highest youth voter turnout in a midterm. And then in 2020, we had the highest youth voter turnout in the history of our country. We're trending upwards. And so we need to continue that. And I think it's a few things. The first one, I already mentioned it, is ensuring that we are meeting people where they're at. We're going to these colleges. We're going to these dorms. We're knocking on people's doors. I was just on an event talking about this, the fact that a lot of times in this discourse around youth vote, we complain about young people voting. But if you look at the budgets for these campaigns and these organizations, they're spending the least amount of money reaching out to young people. It's kind of like the chicken egg, right? Like what's coming first, right? We need to make sure that we're reaching people where they're at. We're knocking on those doors. We're giving the phone calls the folks who might not always vote. We shouldn't see that as a waste of time. We should see it as building power. Right? Building power, expanding the electorate, and bringing more people into it. As an organizer, I always say that, our greatest tool is our story, and our greatest thing we can do is just ask someone to be involved. And I think a lot of times young people aren't really the folks who are asked. So the more we can ask, the better we'll be. The last thing I'll say is, I'm really obsessed with this concept of what I call bridging the gap between cool and consciousness. And understanding how can we as campaigns ensure that we are making it a fun and cool thing to be a part of this fight. And I think March for Our Lives did a great job in that. Voters of Tomorrow, which Justin, you're also involved in, is doing that and ensuring that we're centering cultural joy in everything that we do. If you walk into my campaign office tomorrow, you're going to hear music, you're going to hear laughter, but you're also going to see people butts in chairs dialing, hundreds of phone calls. And so for me, it's finding that happy medium and ensuring that we're giving people something that they're excited about, because the fight, what we're fighting is already depressing. So let's make the fight as joyful as possible.
Absolutely. And I will just also shout out with postcarding. Having postcard parties is a great way to make add some fun and joy into this work. I had a postcard party with a bunch of friends, and we weren't as productive as we should be, but it's still an excellent way to engage with this work. So you helped lead the fight to restore voting rights to over 1.6 million Floridians who previously had felony convictions. Could you talk a bit about that campaign a bit more and what the aftermath of it looked like?
Well, for folks who don't know, we won, right? We won with over 60% of the vote. And I want to talk about that really quick because we've all seen the memes and the jokes of, building a wall around Florida. And I don't know if y'all have seen the meme of Bugs Bunny cutting off Florida. And, it's all fun and games, but, to be serious, I don't see our campaign or I don't see the state as a red state. I mean, if we think about it, we passed Amendment 4. That's a very progressive democratic value that passed with over 60% of the vote. What does that mean? It means a state that voted for Donald Trump voted for this policy that we believe in. Same thing with the $15 minimum wage, which means people who voted for Donald Trump voted for a $15 minimum wage. People who voted for Donald Trump voted to give people with previous felonies the right to vote. So then it's like, whoa, what's the disconnect here? And I think a lot of it has to do with our messaging, and we're getting better at it. And I think the other thing has to do with electing candidates who are going to inspire people and lead with the issues. And that's why I'm running. I really believe electing people like myself across the state are going to help us bridge that gap between the ballot referendums we have that pass overwhelmingly, that bring in Republicans and all these folks, and our candidates. So I have a lot of hope with Florida, and we just need to continue to put resources and do that. But Amendment 4 passed. For folks who don't know, the Republican legislature put a poll tax in, which pretty much said you got to pay certain fees to be able to vote. Something that's disproportionately impacting Black and brown poor communities. It's horrible. It's tragic. And this is why we need to elect good people at the federal level as well, to help fight for folks, especially in the South, who a lot of times we can't depend on our governor. We can't depend on our state legislature, especially with the horrible gerrymandering that's going on. And so we need good members of city council. We need good mayors. We need good members of Congress who can help shield our most vulnerable communities from these horrible attacks.
Absolutely, and thank you for your work on that. You touched on this a little earlier, but due to the passage of anti-voter legislation in the last 2 years in Florida, how has voting changed since 2020?
This is a great question. And what we've seen is, number one, from a positive angle, vote by mail has never seen numbers like we've seen over the last few cycles. And a lot of that has to do with COVID. But I think it's created a good avenue here to show people that, yes, voting can be easy. And I, for one, believe that voting should be one of the easiest things in the world. I think voting should be easy. I believe in automatic voter registration, that right when you turn 18, you should just be registered. You know, the government already has your information. Let's just give people the right to vote. I believe in making Election Day a federal holiday. That way, working class people don't have to take off of work to go vote. And in fact, the reason why working class people and poor folks tend to have lower voting numbers is because a lot of times they don't take off because it's picking between a paycheck and voting. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of times people make the other decision, which we understand, right? And so for me, it's eliminating those barriers and ensuring that we can make things accessible. So how's voting changed? People are seeing that they're more involved with vote by mail, but it's a double-edged sword because now legislatures that want to take away your right to vote understand what to attack now. They need to attack vote by mail. They want to attack these things. And here in Florida, they've made it so that now you have to re-register for vote by mail every damn election. That's ridiculous. And they're purging your name out. And guess what? They're not going to let you know your name's been purged. You just won't receive a ballot. And this is the problem with what's going on. This is why we need to work so hard to get good members of Congress, but also folks elected up and down the ballot so we can ensure people's right to vote is enshrined in all the work that we do.
Yeah, I would love if you could touch a little more on how these new election laws influence the way grassroots campaigns and community organizations like ours should and do communicate with voters about the upcoming primary elections and midterm elections.
Well, y'all are doing it right now, right? You know, making sure that we're communicating with folks in every medium possible. So yes, that means social media, but it also means postcards. And yes, it means postcards, but it also means phone calls. And yes, it means phone calls, but it also means knocking on people's doors. You know, I'm a firm believer that, like I told y'all, I'm a band nerd, right? I was in band and jazz band. It's something that my band director always said is all the things all the time. He made us repeat that at the beginning of every band practice. And that is the motto of my campaign, all the things all the time. We're not just knocking doors, we're going to be on TV. We're not just going to be on TV, we're going to be sending mail. And we're also going to be doing postcards. We need to do everything under the sun to reach people where they're at. Because the fact of the matter is everybody has a different way of living. Some people aren't on social media. Some people don't read their mail. Some people don't watch TV. And so for me, it's figuring out how can we reach people all, in all mediums, and in fact, live by that motto, all the things, all the time. That's how we're going to win.
Thank you. So a lot of people on the call today are involved in our campaigns to get out the vote amongst Black communities ahead of the upcoming primaries and general election, whether it is postcarding or phone banking or sort of text banking perhaps. But what kind of messaging should we use in order to be as effective as possible in turning people out to the polls this fall and summer?
Yeah, well, I'm a very staunch believer, and I said this, I'll say it again, in giving people something to vote for, not against. And so what I'd urge folks to do is, please, work at doing that very thing, right? If you are trying to get people to vote a certain way, or not vote a certain way, but you're urging people to go to the polls, talk about the things you believe in. And I know that this is a nonpartisan group, but even the basic values that we all share across the aisle, right? We're talking about safety. We're talking about people having the ability to live their life. And for me, it's talking about those values. And I think we're really a country where we do share a lot of the same values, but unfortunately, people in power tend to prioritize their power over the needs of people. And so talk to folks about the fact that we can get this better world. We can elect people we believe in, and we just got to go vote. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it's not about red versus blue. It's about the people versus the issues. And I think if we're able to frame it that way, no matter who folks are, Democrat, Republican, no matter what, we'll see them go out to vote and be involved.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maxwell, so much. I am going to pass it over to, I believe, Andrea or Josie. I don't know if we have time for questions in the chat, but Andrea, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Justin. And again, I cannot tell you how delighted I was to have the two of you, our young folks, really working through what we need to do with this election. So I am absolutely thrilled. Maxwell, what district are you running in? And can you tell us a little bit about that district?
Yeah, I'm running in Florida's 10th congressional district. That is Orlando, Florida, pretty much all of Orlando. It's the place where I was born and raised. It is currently held by Val Demings. Val is running for the Senate. And so she is leaving her seat to run for the Senate. So I'm running to ensure that we keep on the great legacy of Val Demings in this seat. And it is a very diverse district. One of the most diverse districts in the country, having many Latino folks, Black folks, white folks, Asian folks, people from across the country. And, I'm really excited to even be being considered and be on the ballot for the honor of representing my home in the United States Congress.
Well, we are thrilled that you are running, and I'm going to just add, I really hope that in future elections, we see more young people step up, because this is really what the country needs. And the young demographic, the 18 to 35-year-olds, in roughly 3-4 years, you are going to be the majority of voters in the United States. So vote your power. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. So,
and
well,
thank you for having me, and thanks y'all for your work. And let's just keep pushing this message of love through policy and caring for one another, because red or blue, that's something we can all agree on. So thank you so much for having me on.
all right, and that is wonderful. And again, I remember Dr. King always talking about the beloved community, and that is very important. So thank you so very much. Now, we are going to move into the activist part of this call. And what does the great state of Florida look like as we work on doing turnout? So Florida 2022, I'm going to do all this really fast. Center for Common Ground, we run the Vote Your Power and the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. We also have a paid internship program called Students for Justice. And in a number of southern states, this election, now it's in the shop and it is being rewrapped. You will be able to see our RV, the Vote Equality RV, will be running through the South. For those who may be new on the call, Center for Common Ground was founded to educate and empower underrepresented voters in voter suppression states I'm going to change this a little bit, to more fully participate in democracy. So in a number of locations, elections are phase one of what we do. And then after the election, we move into phase two, holding people that got elected accountable. Our board of directors has not changed. And as you can see, we are an organization that is led by communities of color, and we are also led by women. We have a lot of national partners, and among them are faith partners, Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, the Unitarian Universalist United Church of Christ, the Workers' Circle, American Ethical Union, Faithful Democracy, Students for Justice, Movement Labs, Vote Equality, the Democracy Labs, and Black Voters Matter, who will also be one of our partners in Florida. Now, this is what you came for. What are our plans in 2022? We want to do outreach to 24 million BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color voters. We reached out to 14 million in 2020. 2020, we were another country. It was another world. 2022, we need to nearly double those efforts. We're going to need to have 60,000 volunteers. We want to expand our democracy-centered campaign into Florida and Texas. We would love to be able to send 16 million postcards to voters. That is counting the primary as well. Make 2.5 million phone calls and send 3.3 million text messages. Now, if we look at my list of target states, you can see that in Florida, we've got a U.S. Senate race. Of course, there's congressional races, governor, the General Assembly. Their primary is August 23rd. And what is amazing about Florida, Florida is already a majority minority state at 55.83%. So again, I said they've got US Senate, US House, governors, some state executive offices, their entire state house, all 120 seats, their entire state Senate. Early voting begins in Florida August 13th through the 20th. Some counties may be starting as early as August 8th. Now, what did Florida look like? When I built my research website and I updated the numbers in March of 2022, Florida had 13.9 million registered voters. 1.9 million, nearly 2 million were Black. 2.6 million were Hispanic. 300,000 were AAPI. 8.7 million were Caucasian, and 44,000 were Native Americans. When I ran the numbers today to pull the number of voters who did not vote in 2020 and 2018, Florida is now down to 13.3 million voters since March. Now, these are statistics. I love my statistics. So the important thing here is when we look at communities of color, do we have an opportunity to turn out voters who can vote but did not vote? And the answer is yes, we most certainly do. Those numbers range from a low of 23% to a high of 27%. So when we look at a state, what is very important to us is, are there voters that fall within the demographics of our outreach, where we see if we can turn out 20% of those numbers, can we positively impact that election? And the answer is yes. Normally, in many of the states where we have worked and we have won elections, we have been able to turn out upwards of 30% of voters who have stopped voting. So we have a lot of hope for Florida, especially if Florida can come up with exciting candidates like young Mr. Frost. Now, our current postcard campaign, as Nancy and Carrie mentioned, is to Black voters in Florida who did not vote in 2020, nor did they vote in 2018. We loaded 1.2 million addresses in voter letters, and about half of those addresses are still available. If you wish to postcard with us, someone will drop the link directly in the chat so that you'll be able to see it. And then you will be able to get addresses and a script and all the information that you need to send postcards to voters. Now, for our campaigns, we do require that you use our postcards, which have been described as culturally sensitive and racially motivating, not to mention they are absolutely stunning. Now, people periodically ask, are postcards effective? Well, if you have the right message and you are postcarding and targeting the right population, postcards can be extremely effective. Now, the last postcarding that we did, where all the voting numbers are back and we can compare who we sent postcards to and who voted, was a 2021 campaign in Petersburg, Virginia. We picked Petersburg, Virginia because nobody else was really doing any work in Petersburg other than us. So out of 17,433 Black voters where we had telephone numbers and cell numbers, 6974 voted, or 40% of the voters that we reached out to. In Petersburg, there were 6,300 voters where we did not have phone numbers. All we had was an address. So we sent them a postcard, which was probably the only outreach they received. 43% of the people who all they got was a postcard showed up and voted. We have a new postcard for the 2022 campaign. It is an Equal Rights Amendment postcard. Florida is an unratified state, meaning when they first came around for states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, and even since 2017, when the last 3 required states to reach 38 states ratified, Florida is still an unratified state. So this is our new postcard for 2022. Gabriel mentioned that we currently have phone banks up and running for Arizona, for Maricopa County and Pima County, and we will soon be bringing up the Florida counties for the primaries. And Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have national guided phone banks. And if you have young people, Justin will be working to put together a group of young people phone banks where we would really like to be able to have young people doing outreach to other young people. So it's not just their grandmother and their grandfather type people fussing at them about voting. So hopefully you will know someone. Justin, drop your contact information in the chat, or if you have a sign up form, please add that. And as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to tax 3.3 million voters. I have 1.3 million cell numbers for Florida. All right. So that is my report on Florida for the evening. I am happy to entertain questions. If anybody has any, you can either raise your hand or just drop them in the chat. Florida is going to be an amazing race. Oh, they're all quiet tonight. I think young Mr. Frost exhausted people with his energy. I loved his energy. Kathy, hang on. I will invite you to unmute. Go ahead, Kathy. You can unmute.
Yeah, I was just curious. I think the thing that worries me right now is the whole vote by mail, and the fact that on the one hand, we want to encourage a lot of these people to vote by mail, but at the same time, it sounds like they're trying to find more and more ways to make those votes invalid by either not recognizing or not accepting the signature. And, you know, how can we combat that? Because I think there really is a big voter suppression effort going on, and I think Florida is no exception. And as someone who has been here and has used vote by mail, you know, it really worries me. Not only are they making us re-up all the time, but the whole idea of signature checking and things like that. What can we do? You know, what can we tell people? Because again, I think your points about making sure voters understand, you know, how to vote and where to vote and all those kinds of things, that's a very big piece of this, and that they understand how to vote by mail properly so that they really get it counted.
Kathy, that is a phenomenal observation. Generally, Center for Common Ground, we try to encourage people to early vote in person if that is at all possible, because voting by mail is very, very hard. For the voter, there's a number of things that you can do wrong. You can forget to sign your ballot. You can sign your ballot. And again, depending upon what version of your signature are they looking at. A friend of mine said, I'll never try to vote by mail because my signature from even 5 years ago is very, very different from my signature now. And unless I was looking at it, you probably wouldn't say, oh, this is the same person. So as an organization, we prefer, when we are doing voter outreach, we ask voters what their preference is. Do they plan to early vote, vote by mail, or vote on election day? If they're going to vote by mail, then we have a much longer conversation with them, because as you said, number one, they're going to have to request their ballot. Some of our states now require that you include a copy of your ID with your ballot request. And that can be very, very difficult for rural voters. And then there's also the whole issue with the US Postal Service. Are you going to get your ballot in time? Once you vote your ballot, will there be drop boxes? Can you get to the drop box? It's just very, 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 very hard. There are people who have always voted by mail and are very, very comfortable with it. There are people where this is something new and it's going to be difficult for a lot of our older Georgia voters who, the Black and rural ones, many had never ever voted by mail. People gave folks their phone numbers and said, when you get your ballot, vote it and then call me and we will walk you through putting it together so that you can mail it. We've done that. So yes. Oh, Josie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just raising my hand. On the subject of voting by mail in Florida and the new barriers that there are, I just wanted to put in a plug for our event on July 21st. It's going to be with Florida State Senator Chevron Jones, and he also started an organization called Operation Blackout, which the sole focus of this organization is getting Black voters in Florida comfortable with vote by mail and promoting vote by mail. So if you want to learn more about how they're dealing with these new barriers and still trying to get people to vote by mail, you should join us for that. So I'll put the link in the chat.
Oh, great. Thanks, Josie. I didn't put that in my presentation, but thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, thank all of you for joining tonight. I'm going to put in one last call for questions, and the impossible is going to happen. You may get out of here a little bit early. Oh, all right. Yes. Oh, I've got another question. Katie, go ahead, unmute.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm just wondering what kind of messaging we're able to do regarding what Maxwell was talking about of being able to put groceries on the table. And I'm concerned about that being a vulnerability. And so just wondering in the bigger sense of things, if I do phone banking and all that kind of thing.
Gabe, do you want to take that? Or normally our phone bank scripts are taken and built up from our postcard scripts. And we spend a lot of time talking with groups on the ground about what are the issues in your community. So Gabe, do you want to take that, Nancy or Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, we usually organize our phone banks to be, they're fairly geographically specific in nature. So if we are receiving words from certain communities that some language, may be more or less appropriate for them than other communities that we're calling, we can be really responsive to that.
I'll also just add that Maxwell brought up an excellent point with that of because you're right that it's something that can be seen as like a vulnerability. I think he made an excellent point of like acknowledging that it is an issue and saying that pointing to like raising the minimum wage as a excellent response to that of something that can counteract that. So just add that.
Thanks, Justin, for jumping in. Are there any other questions? And a note that I just dropped in the chat, since we are a C3 and we are nonpartisan, our messaging does not revolve around candidates. It revolves around what local people have told us are the local issues of concern. Kathy. Let me try that again. Kathy, you can unmute.
Sorry, $15 an hour is better than, like the old minimum, but it still doesn't get people a living wage, especially not today when rents are just going up at a phenomenal rate and food and everything else is going up at a phenomenal rate. I mean, if we're talking to someone and they're at all savvy about this sort of thing, they're going to say, it's not enough. Especially if they have a family or even a single person, I'm not sure whether it would work, but definitely a family can't live on $15 an hour.
Something I would plug is, part of it is, we know and acknowledge that there are a lot of issues for voters in Florida and elsewhere that are not being met by current politicians. And when people go vote their issue, I know there's a lot of apathy, but there are already policies in place, like Build Back Better, for example, others that have been written with provisions that are intended to, for example, continue the child tax credit and really try to prioritize American families that are struggling to put food on their table. So while we can't speak about direct politicians that would do that, we can say, when you're going to the polls, you're voting to have more security for your family, that kind of thing. I hope that's helpful.
Well,
Also, we're not really, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, many of the voters that we speak to are low-income wage earners. So they're making $7.50 an hour if they're making that much. So everything is relative. We are calling BIPOC voters, many of them are rural. So it's a whole different paradigm shift. EC, oh, hang on, I've got it. There you go. Unmute EC.
Thanks, Andrea. You pretty much covered it just now. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that it's a different lifestyle in the South, that we're nowhere near $7 and $15 an hour. If a person, even though they may be making $10 an hour, that's above the minimum wage. So if we can get to 15, that's a huge start, because what you have to remember that if the minimum wage is 15, that's going to push every other level of wages up also. So that's why we're trying to get to at least a minimum of 15, because that affects everybody's wages. So thank you, Andrea, you covered that.
All right. And again, I remember the last time I was looking something up regarding what was the poverty level. And in San Francisco, the federal poverty level was $114,000 a year. You had to make $114,000 just to be poor in San Francisco. So the world of California and New York and the world of southern states, it's literally a different planet. Jessica.
Hey, everybody, and I apologize for coming in late, and I'm sorry for talking while I'm driving. I just wanted to say really quickly that I have done a decent amount of phone banking for with you guys with Reclaim Our Vote. And my experience has been that most people don't really, a specific policy doesn't come up all that much. I have found that most of it is helping people to vote, helping them know where their polling place is, helping them know how to fill out that vote by mail ballot. It's really Almost everybody I've talked to in a Reclaim Our Vote phone bank wants to vote, and like who they're going to vote for is not really in question. I mean, I know this is nonpartisan, but like nobody I talk to on these phone banks is like, I'm going to go vote for a MAGA person. There are people, but they need help because they've made it really damn hard for them to vote. So these phone banks feel so good because we're just helping people to vote. Like that's literally almost all it is. It's the easiest, loveliest phone banking I've done. So I just wanted to put out that plug for it.
Oh, thank you so very much, Jessica.
Yay.
Yeah. Oh, Carrie and then Lode.
Oh, just a quick thing to, pile on about phone banking. Where a lot of people, especially white liberals in more metropolitan areas say, oh, I don't want to phone bank because I hate getting these calls, because we get bombarded with a million calls. But a lot of our voters don't get called and don't get any attention. They're rural and the voting record is iffy. And the candidate campaigns tend to go for the frequent voters, the sure thing voters, So people start to feel like nobody gives a damn about me. And when we call them with helpful information, it's really, really different than one of us who gets overcalled, and we're like, oh no, another call. So we have to try not to project our realities onto other voters in other areas.
Thanks, Carrie. Lode, our Georgia coordinator.
Greetings, good night, everyone. I wanted to quickly assist with bringing it full circle about how different the rural areas in the South are. So right now we are working with GA Conservative Voters Education Fund in combating this utility bill, electric bill from Georgia Power, which is a power company that has a monopoly down here. We are going through a rate increase. It occurs every 3 years. However, this rate increase is the most substantial. They're asking for a $200 rate increase with this rate hike. Now, if you are in rural Georgia, the highest paying job may get you maybe $15 to $20 an hour. That may be at a plant, that may be at one of these big industrial companies that's headquarters or working out of rural Georgia. Well, if you make it through 2 rate increases, now you are giving almost an entire paycheck just to pay your utility bills. So we're seeing this direct correlation between, utility instability and housing instability. Because if you have to give one paycheck to your utilities, then where's your food? How are you going to pay for food? How are you going to pay for your gas? That's, with all of this inflation. How are you going to pay your rent? And many people are choosing to pay their utilities and feed their children over paying their rent or mortgage. This is a big thing that's very different than anywhere in the United States. So at this time, I posted about our postcarding party wagon. But a part of our postcards, we're going to have like a little sticker on there, like "Don't Raise Our Bill," which is a hashtag provided or started by the GA Conservation Voters Education Fund. So I just wanted to help bring that full circle just on how different rural areas in the South are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lode. All right. It has been a very, very exciting evening. So with that, it is 9:02. I am going to bid you all good night and say thank you so very much for joining us.